I'm Darrell Simpson, Extension Agent for Agriculture in Muhlenberg County, Kentucky. With me today is Curtis Dame, Hopkins County Extension Agent for Agriculture. We're talking about transporting oversized farm equipment.
From the 1950s forward, we've seen efficiency on the farm increase. And how has that happened? It's happened with major advancements in not only technology, but machinery as well. And what we've seen is that we've had a major size increase with that machinery. It is more efficient, but you need a larger size piece of equipment, whether it be the headers on a combine, tillage equipment like you see in the background here, or other pieces of equipment. Now with that though, that size for the roadway has increased also. So then what we run into are obstacles going down the roadway, whether it be a car, mailboxes, telephone poles, the physical width of the roadway itself. Those all create some type of stress factor or just overall hindrance when you're running down the roadway.
You know, we're looking at roads 15 to 17 foot wide, and we look at equipment being 12 foot wide. So you can see there's not a lot of room for the equipment to be moving up and down the road, and then just a general passenger vehicle, whether it be a pickup truck or a car or something of that nature. And so it's so important that farmers and general motorists think about how we're going to move past each other on the roadways.
When you're moving oversized equipment, Darrell, inside of Kentucky, you've got to always be careful. With the roadways that we have in the state, of course they were based off chariots at the time of their manufacturing, so they're narrow. When you start looking at some of the farm equipment that's operated on the roadway, it's getting wider and wider, getting bigger. With Kentucky, you have a 12 foot before you're required to have any kind of flagging or signs or escorts that must be in play. Whenever you're operating on any roadway in the state, you must adhere to that 12-foot mark.
When we're moving equipment, oftentimes we think, well, you know, we need every bit of the road we can get, but we need to understand that we have to share the road. And so part of the road is ours, part of that is the general motorist there.
Before you ever go to a new property or to go look at a field, you're typically going to do that in your automobile. You're not going to grab your convoy and take all of your equipment on the first trip. So by doing that, you have now planned. You are now looking at the roadway. Where can I ingress and egress? Where do I need to go into this field? You can do the same thing with your pull-offs. And remember, when you're moving this equipment, a lot of it, if you're in some newer equipment, you're going to run 25 to 30 miles per hour. But a lot of your older equipment, you may not get that. You know, you may be 15, 10 even. So you're traveling slower as it is. So if you take the time to plan your routes, plan where you're going to be, look at the time of day. Is it school bus traffic that morning? Is it school bus traffic in the afternoon? Is it lunchtime? Do you know that typically at this time of day that if you live in an area that has a bypass, that bypass is going to be congested? Don't make your moves then. If you can, make your moves in a time frame that it is less congestion, and by just planning, that's part of it.
Can you talk a little bit about how you prepare your operation to move equipment down the roadway?
Walk around the equipment, check the lights, make sure none of them is obstructed, covered with any dirt or dust or anything. Make sure all the lights are working on the escort vehicle. Making sure that the CBs are working, making sure everybody's got their volume up and on the same channel.
Back around.
Yeah.
So you just typically make a good overall pass through the equipment, make sure you don't have any flat tires, anything like that.
That also, yeah.
Yeah. Key things to get down the road,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. What's a typical travel or typical move like for you all?
Generally, probably I'd say 3 to 5 miles.
What advice would you give to farmers based on your experience moving equipment?
Know the roads you're taking, the routes, spots that you can pull over, safe places to get the equipment out of the way for oncoming traffic, knowing where your blind spots would be in the roadways, the curves, hills, and the bridges, that kind of thing.
What tends to give you the most trouble when you're moving down the road? Is it the narrow bridges that you run into? Are those the choke points that you see? Or is it road width? Or what do you see?
A mixture of everything, all the above.
Do you typically try to move in the morning, at night, or does it just depend on the schedule and how things are going?
Depends on the move where we're going to. If we're liable to be moving from one end of the county to the other, we would try to plan it when we're not in the middle of rush hour, a lot of traffic, or in the afternoon, you know, people getting off work, and school buses.
So we talked about your overall route throughout the county. When you're planning that route, do you try to shoot for major roadways, or do you go for county roadways when you're trying to move?
We try to take the major roadways that, you know, the widest lanes that you can run in, and we try to avoid the little narrow county roads.
What are the minimum requirements for the escort vehicle as it relates to lighting, signage, and flagging?
When you've got your escort vehicles, you want to make sure that they do have the sign on the front. It must be a yellow sign with black lettering. The sign itself has to be 6 feet to 8 feet in length, and it must be 18 inches high. So it has to have that oversized load, and that's so it shows off when you're meeting a motorist. The other thing, you do have to have an amber light on top of the vehicle, oscillating or strobe, something LEDs, that does show off that you are giving warning to motorists traveling in front of you. You are also required to have radio contact between the escort vehicle and the piece of equipment that you are following.
What would dictate in terms of needing a rear escort, or is there a need for a rear escort?
There are needs for rear escorts, depending on the roadways that you are on. If you are on a 2-lane road or a 4-lane road, that is going to be where the dictation is. If you are on a 2-lane roadway, you're going to have that one escort in the front. When you get onto a 4-lane road and you're outside of 12 feet, you have to have that rear escort in place at that point in time.
Can you talk about the law as it relates to the maximum and minimum distances and liability if an oncoming motorist goes by the escort vehicle and an accident occurs?
Yes, whenever you're traveling down the roadway and you have that escort vehicle in place, the maximum distance that you can be is 300 feet off the front of that equipment or to the rear of that equipment. The thing that's going to dictate whether or not you're going to close that distance is going to be the area that you're traveling. If it's congested, if you have an area that the roadway narrows, or if you have an area where a bridge may be and it funnels down, then you want to close the gap between the tow vehicle and your escort vehicle. You want to minimize that space, because once someone does come past your escort vehicle, if you've got a larger gap there, then you lose that safety net of keeping that individual aware. Because if you get out past that 300 feet, and especially in somewhere there's a curve, or if it's a blind area, and that individual passes the escort vehicle, he's thinking, oh, well, there's nothing here. And then now he pops around that curve and there's a combine in his lane, or there may be a tractor. If you are in someone else's lane, remember, you have your lane to travel in only. You are legally not allowed to be in the other lane. Now, common sense will tell anyone you've got a piece of equipment as large as some that is on the roadway now, you're gonna be. We understand that. What you have to do is you have to plan. You have to look at the areas that you're traveling. Are there areas that you can get off? Is there a shoulder in place, or is it ditch lines on both sides of the roadway? What can you do to attempt to make that move a lot safer?
Could there be a need for 2 escorts?
Most definitely, definitely. You're better off to actually have more. More would be better if you're in somewhere where the roadway funnels down, or if you're in an area to where your farm may be on top of a hill crest that may turn back more of a 90-degree turn, and you are going to now have to stop traffic. Legally, you cannot do that. So by having 2 pieces of equipment, 2 escort vehicles or a second flagger there, it will actually help slow down traffic and hopefully safely get you into the field, as opposed to possibly causing an accident or getting someone injured or equipment damaged. nighttime moves are okay. Just remember when you do make your nighttime moves that you do have the proper lighting. Because if you get out into some of these rural communities and areas and you are off on some back road and it's a blind curve, during the daylight hours, you're not going to see what's around that curve. But during nighttime hours, it's going to light up the neighborhood and you're going to be able to see pretty well what's coming at you. You know that there's something at you and, hey, I may need to slow down or I may need to take another course of action.
Talk about the lighting on the equipment itself. Say if we're pulling a disc or something of that nature, talk about the lighting that's required on that, especially if we're moving at night.
We'll start with the by day. Anything that's traveling less than 25 miles per hour is required to have the slow moving triangle. You know, your triangle with the orange middle and the red outside has to have that on there. If it exceeds 25 miles per hour, and a lot of your new equipment is getting up there, if you'll notice, a lot of those are coming with turn signals, brake lights, tail lights. Those all have to be in play. And we all know you get out in the field or you're going down through, you hit a tree, and what happens? You end up knocking off that edge piece that's got your lighting on there. Have that replaced. It's still like your automobile. When you're traveling, you have to have that. Your equipment, if you do have that disc or if you do have that big piece of equipment, especially if it's outside of 12 feet, you still have to flag those. Now, when I say flag, I don't mean your streamers or I don't mean just putting a rag. I'm talking an 18 by 18 red or fluorescent orange flag. And you can pick these up at most any place, they'll sell them to you. And you need to not only flag the four corners, but also you need to flag the widest points of that piece of equipment. When you're traveling at nighttime, same rules apply. The only difference is now you're using lights. So instead of having your flags, now those widest points, you are going to have that light. You're going to have the lights on the four corners. You're going to have that oscillating light. Same way with your escort vehicles. They're going to have all lights activated. And moving at nighttime, a lot of these pieces of equipment now, they have got lights everywhere. So you're going to be lit up pretty well going down your average country road.
We always take anything that's going on the roadway very serious because we have to keep traffic flowing on the roadways in Hopkins County. That's our main mission. We also know that farm equipment is always going to be on the road, especially at certain times of the year when they're putting crops out and when they're harvesting crops. So every year we end up responding to a couple of farm accidents every year that are on the roadway involving farm equipment.
Be mindful that you can contact your local law enforcement to get some help in some of these areas of high traffic that may be used to help you alleviate some of that stress, not only for you as an operator, but for a motorist.
We're always very happy to assist with moving equipment on roadways. As long as it's the equipment that's legally able to be on the roadway, we're going to assist when we can. Farming in Hopkins County is very important. We are a county agency, so I feel like it's our responsibility to assist them when they need it. And all of my personnel understand that as well. But if it's generally if they're moving a short distance, they can handle that themselves as long as they do it properly and follow the laws. But if they're traveling a certain distance or it's a piece of equipment that they're kind of concerned about or worried about being on the roadway, just call us and we'll send out an officer with blue lights and a safety equipment and we'll try to coordinate with them and figure out if you're leaving from point A and going to point B, we'll assist you in doing that. But generally, if you give us 48 hours notice, if you know you're about to have a big move with several pieces of equipment or large equipment or something of that nature, just call us 48 hours in advance at least, and we'll get that scheduled and we'll get somebody to you.
From the standpoint of the state police,
I'm more than glad to come out and talk to anybody at their farm, look at their equipment, more than glad to, and I would rather discuss in a meeting room what we can do or discuss it on your farm, what we can do to make you a safer move or make that individual driving that vehicle a lot safer as opposed to now having to come and work that collision that has now taken time out of your day. It's taken that equipment off the roadway. You may be injured, so now you have that to go into place.
What are the requirements there in terms of communication?
It has to be in a way that they are communicating, such as you and I. They can talk back and forth freely. One of the ways is, of course, the CB radio, a two-way radio, or even if you're on the cell phone. Now remember, when you're on the cell phones in a commercial vehicle, it cannot be in your hand. You must have that Bluetooth or hands-free device, and that would go for your equipment too, just from a safety standpoint. You've got enough equipment, operations in that equipment to manipulate that the last thing you need is that cell phone up to your hand. So when you're operating, you want to make sure you keep your hands free to do the job at hand.
Yeah, that makes really good sense that would be the case then.
I know we've had conversations in the past about moving trucks down the roadway too, and by trucks we're talking about semis or large loads of grain. You know, how do you communicate with those pieces of equipment as well? Do you have wireless headsets for your phone? I mean, I know that's required.
Yeah.
But what do you all use for that? Just CBs?
Just mainly CBs. And another thing with this, using the CBs, that I feel like is more beneficial to us is, you know, we're in cold country, so a lot of cold trucks and running up and down the road. And by using CB radios, we can turn down to channel 19, which is what generally everybody's on, and you can kind of let them guys know what's coming if there's a piece of farm machinery coming at them.
Well, that's a topic we really hadn't considered, the ability to communicate with other truck drivers too. So you can do that when you're in farm equipment as well.
Yeah.
We're traveling at, say, 55 miles per hour on a state highway, and farm equipment is traveling at, say, 35 miles per hour, 25 miles per hour. We're obviously going to approach that equipment very quickly. If you see farm equipment, you generally always need to be ready to at least take your foot off the accelerator. That way you can judge what's happening up ahead and what that farm equipment's doing. It may be slowing to make a turn into a field, so you need to be able to make that judgment before you decide to pass that farm equipment, whether or not that farm equipment's about to make a turn. The heavier it is, the longer the stopping distance is. Just same way with farm equipment. They can't stop on a dime. It takes a large amount of time and distance for a large piece of equipment to stop.
Have you witnessed any issues with texting and driving related to not only maybe farmers texting and driving, but also motorists on the roadway?
Yeah, if you're traveling 55 miles per hour, for example, people don't realize, and if you put the math to that and do the formulas involved with that, if you're traveling 55 miles per hour on a roadway, you're traveling more than 80 feet per second. So if you're texting and driving and it takes you 1 second to look at that phone and look back up at the roadway, you've already traveled over 80 feet. And that is, people don't realize how fast that is, and then what kind of a distance you're closing in on a piece of farm equipment that's ahead of you if you're not paying attention to the roadway. So to put it in perspective, if you're traveling 55 miles per hour, in just over 4 seconds, you've already traveled the length of a football field. So if you're looking at your cell phone for 4 seconds and look up, you've already traveled the entire length of a football field, and you could be already struck a piece of equipment, ran another vehicle off the roadway, injured or killed yourself or somebody else. It's just not worth it. That text can wait. I think we've seen ad campaigns that say that. I mean, texting can wait. It's not that important. What's important is that you're paying attention to the roadway, hands on the wheel. That's always important. It goes along with the common courtesy. That's not common courtesy. That could be somebody's life.
So Danny, Sheriff Sanderson mentioned too that sometimes people don't realize just how slow farm equipment's going. At the average, you probably travel, what, 25, 30 miles per hour when you're going down the roadway, and that's if it's good road conditions. Have you ever had any experiences where people will come right up on your equipment and not realize how fast you're going?
Yeah, absolutely. We had an incident a few years back where a gentleman in a pickup come up too fast behind us, and we was moving our backhoe down the highway, and he plowed right into the back of us. And thank goodness nobody was hurt. It caught his truck on fire, and it burnt to the ground right in the middle of the highway. But you know, the man, you know, he said afterwards that he didn't realize that how slow we were going, and just wasn't really paying attention like he probably should have been, and of course an accident occurred.
Yeah, so you've done your due diligence to make sure those lights were working. You had the emblems there to help the driver as well.
Correct.
But they just didn't realize how slow you were going.
Correct.
we are tasked with moving the equipment, but we're also tasked with being good neighbors and then also sharing the road. That's the law. Having a little patience. You know, if we're going to go pick the kids up from soccer practice or, you know, baseball practice or what have you, let's take just a little extra time and be careful. It's certainly more important that we arrive to our destination unhurt.
You know, people need to understand that it's always important to share the roadway. It doesn't matter who's on the road. The road is for everyone as long as they're legally on the roadway. And farm equipment is one of those things, and there's special exceptions actually for farm equipment to be on the roadway. So people need to understand and have it's just common courtesy. Not to mention that, you know, if we don't have farmers moving from field to field, then it's kind of hard to put food on the table, which we all need. So it's important that people slow down, take a deep breath, and understand that slow-moving vehicle, that farmer doesn't want to be on the road. They want to be in the field, because when they're on the roadway, they're not really being productive. When they're in the field is when they're being productive. So they don't want to be on the roadway any more than you want them to be on the roadway. But it's just common courtesy. It may take a little time, but they're just usually moving from one field to the next or back to their base. And sometimes it just takes a while for that stuff to occur. So just understand that it may take a few minutes. And most of the farm equipment has a flag vehicle at the rear sometimes, and at least in the front most of the time. And you know, it's if you see those, you need to be prepared to stop and slow down, and it may take a few minutes.
So basically, you don't move your equipment down the roadways for the fun of it.
Yeah,
you
we're not doing it
it's
for
the
the
least fun thing you do.
It's getting, with this day and age, everybody's got a cell phone, and everybody you pass is either texting or talking on the phone, and it gets more nerve-wracking every year. And sometimes you feel like when you pull that on the highway, you cross your fingers and hope for the best that you make it from point A to point B.
So if you had to rank it on the stressful items of business you do on the farm, probably moving equipment down the roadway ranks in the top.
Absolutely.
On the stress factor for
Absolutely.
farmers.
Yeah.
All right, Danny, real quick, let's touch base on some of the topics of advice you would give to the average motorist traveling down the roadway when they meet farm equipment.
Well, I'd say first of all, when we're moving equipment, we kind of know the spots that we can get some of this big, large equipment off the road safely and allow the oncoming traffic and the automobiles behind us to pass and meet. And there's some places that you know, I feel like people get a little frustrated with us because we're not pulling over, but they don't realize with some of this equipment, it's you know, it's wide, a lot of it's top heavy, and we can't just pull over just anywhere for, you know, the safety of ourselves and all the, you know, people in the automobiles beside us. A lot of the places that you pull off, it may look like a good place to pull off, but the shoulder may be soft. And there's been a lot of places we've been and come really close to nearly turning a piece of equipment over. And for the most part, we probably don't drive, you know, maybe 2 miles, 3 miles without trying to pull over. I mean, people need to understand that I'm going to pull over. We just have to find a place that's safe for everybody else. We don't want to put anybody in harm's way.
We've talked about the farmer. Let's talk about the general public. What advice would you give to them in terms of them meeting oversized farm equipment?
Remember that they're the ones that feed us and they're the ones that help clothe us. So be patient, obey all the traffic laws. If you can pass in a safe area and you can do it safely, of course pass them. But please, please pay attention to the driver of that tractor or that flag vehicle especially, because they're there for a reason, for your safety. And because we get in a hastily a way of life today, it causes us to be impatient and it causes us to make moves that could get someone injured.
Those are some of the issues we run into. But more importantly, though, you need to consider the laws of the roadway, the weight limits of the roadway, the type of traffic, the time of day, school buses on the roadway, whether or not they have kids in the school bus themselves or not. You know, that's a primary safety issue. They're not supposed to get off the roadway. And so that's something that we as farmers and extension agents, we sometimes take for granted. But most of the time, it comes back to courtesy on the roadways. And so as far as my family's concerned and other farm families, and whether it be Western Kentucky or across the United States, the key thing to do is to prepare yourself when you're getting ready to travel a certain route to the next field. Be mindful that you can contact your local law enforcement, vehicle regulations, what have you, to figure out ways to solve these problems on the farm and hopefully get you to the end destination you're trying to go to. Now, a lot of farmers mention that sometimes harvest is the most stressful. You're trying to get that crop out of the field, but for motorists it may seem stressful when you're behind those pieces of equipment. But I can guarantee you, regardless of what farmer it is, they just want to get safely to their place of operation and hopefully let you pass them in a timely manner too. Because we all share the roadways and we all pay taxes as well. So we might as well make the best of both worlds and get to where we want to go.
Our main goal here today is to make sure that folks understand what both parties are looking at, again, whether that be the general public or the farmers. But ultimately, our ultimate goal is to promote farm safety.
We've enjoyed giving you different aspects and views of some of the situations you might run into while going down the roadway. But if you have any questions at all, contact those agencies we've interviewed today or give your local extension office a call. I feel like any agent throughout the state or throughout the country for that matter can get you adequate information.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Curtis.
Thanks, Daryl. It's good seeing you.